was a movie I was allowed to see when I was young because there was a lot of cursing and a lot of violence. Just a lot of violence, but there was no nudity or sex. Now, there is a sex scene with Nicolas Cage for all your boners and lady boners out there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blockbuster Reviews. If you don't know what that is, it is where I play a single game of Marathon on Tetris 99 and try to review a film before the blocks get all the way to the top or I get 150 lines. Now, the tentative rule is spoilers at 50 lines. We'll see if I keep to that. So, the movie The Rock was a film that came out in the 90s starring Sir Nicolas Cage and Sir Sean Connery, Ed Harris, a bunch of dudes whose names I don't remember. It was directed by good old Michael Bay and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, who made a bunch of man movies together. And you know what I mean by man movies. They're for men. They're made by men for men. And The Rock is no exception, man. It's rated R, and it is very violent, very intense, and pretty awesome. It's one of my favorite movies. I think I say favorite, but I mean one of my guilty pleasure movies. It's one of those movies that I've seen a billion times. And I think it's one of those movies that has a dear place in my heart because it was one of the first films I was allowed to see that was rated R. Because you see, kids, I don't know if you know this, but films are actually rated for the people that are allowed to enjoy it, according to a group of people called the MPAA. I believe that, yeah, the MPAA. And they're completely arbitrary because, of course, you have access to the internet, which has every form of pornography known to man. And since you know more about your computers than your parents do, you probably have seen already the worst possible things imagined. But hey, we gotta make sure you don't hear fuck more than once. Anyway, rant over. So, The Rock was a movie I was allowed to see when I was young because there was a lot of cursing and a lot of violence. Just a lot of violence, but there was no nudity or sex. Now, there is a sex scene with Nicolas Cage for all your boners and lady boners out there. But I would say it's not very sexy because it includes Nicolas Cage trying to be sexy, which is very unsexy. Anyway, what are we talking about? We're talking about The Rock. So The Rock is a movie about, man, I mean, I'm going to get to spoiler territory by the time I end this, that's for sure. Essentially a disgruntled, determined ex-military man played by Ed Helms. He is Frank Hummel. He has concocted a plan to get what he believes is justice for men that he believes were just kind of like screwed over by the government. I guess there was this like total black ops team that would run insane ops into areas that we don't officially have any troubles with. And then they would just, wreck house, kill a whole bunch of people. But if they died, their families were given, he would call them lies and, what did he call them? Fairy tales about what happened to them. And then their families wouldn't get compensation, which makes no sense. And I agree. It's one of those things where you'd hear about it on C-SPAN, or you'd see a clip of it on, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and you'd be disgusted. So the guy is, wow, I'm already at 50, I better fucking hurry it up. So he concocts this plan for basically domestic terrorism, where he gets these VX poison gas rockets. I forgot what is it called? The VX poison? Anyway, I'm already at 50. Essentially, the good guys win and the bad guys lose. That's all you really need to know in terms of spoilers, but Ed Hummel gets a bunch of his old Marine buddies that he's worked with for years and years, and a couple of mercenary Marines to hatch this scheme where they're going to use the tourists at Alcatraz That's why it's called The Rock. He's going to use the tourists at Alcatraz to house these chemical weapons that he has aimed at San Francisco to extort money from the government to pay off these families that he believed were screwed over by the Pentagon. Well, by the government in general. So, in reaction, they come up with a couple teams, a couple ideas. One of them is to just bomb the whole island and kill all of the, oh shit, all the tourists in there. That's going to be a problem. Better get some breathing room, even though I wanted to slow down for the story. They come up with this plan that involves getting the best chemical agent from the FBI, which happens to be Raging Nick Cage, who, you know, he's just living his normal life, you know, just talking about Beatles albums, having sex with his lovely girlfriend who he's not married to, finds out she's pregnant, and he gets the call that he has to go help with this situation, and she's gonna come because he told her it was probably a training exercise. Then the FBI also pulls out John Mason, played by the incomparable Sean Connery, who's basically James Bond. There's this internet theory that he's just playing James Bond, and James Bond was captured by America, and they use him to infiltrate The Rock because he was a former inmate of The Rock until he escaped, which everyone thinks no one escaped except John Mason / James Bond escapes. What happens, of course, you know, standard Michael Bay fare. A lot of people die. There's a lot of guns, lots of explosions, but because it's rated R, and you can show some of that violence and some of that extra grit, it's people, not giant robots that are getting torn apart. And it's just funny. And I say funny because the back and forth between Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage is super funny, because you have this actor who is like world renowned, known for being some of the most iconic characters, you know, in history, and then you have Sean Connery. You know, obviously I'm kidding, but it's just funny because the jokes work, and they're funny together, and it's a really intense story. The only criticism I have for The Rock, after watching it so many times over the years, it's just a bit too long. You know, like, it's like when you've had gum that you've just kept too long because you haven't thrown it away yet, and like the taste is gone. And not to say that the ending is bad or that it doesn't resolve well, because the ending is actually pretty cool. You find out that John Mason, the only reason they've kept him alive, because he's an ex-British Secret Service agent who's been disavowed by his country, because he has access to a microfilm that J. Edgar Hoover famously supposedly had when he was the head of the CIA that contains most of the country's secrets. And because he refuses to give up where that microfilm is, they decided to keep him locked up without any trial or any due process whatsoever for 30 years. So he comes out ready to kick ass on The Rock and buddy it up with old Nick Cage. And, you know, it's unlikely duo. Two guys that have very different forms of training and different levels of badassery. And it's super fun. But I wanted to highlight one scene. I think you should all watch this movie. Especially if you think like, wow, did Michael Bay ever make good stuff? And I've never seen Bad Boys, so I'm assuming those were good too, because I've heard great things about that. But The Rock was awesome, and I think it's because there was no like intense CGI. But the important thing I wanted to say before I completely end this thing at 150 lines, there's a scene with Ed Harris, who plays this very proud, very intense, and I didn't give away a big spoiler, which is good. I think you should watch it. Watch The Rock. It's not a documentary on Dwayne The Rock Johnson. It's a Michael Bay movie that's actually good. And Ed Harris has this conversation with this, like, British Secret Service guy, where they talk about the legitimacy of what they're doing. Because, basically, there's so much to tell you, but I don't have enough time. Basically, there's a situation where they're both facing each other, and it's really tense because we're not sure what's going to happen. They've been trying to kill, well, Sean Connery's been killing his men, and he's been trying to kill him for like most of the movie. And then they have this dialogue that is just super cool and awesome, and I want you to watch it. Go watch The Rock, especially for that scene. Super cool. Yeah, very military based. I shouldn't keep talking. Game's already over. The Rock, go check it out. One of my favorites. Peace.